The sun hung low over Crestwood Meadows, a modest stretch of green beside the Ashley River's lazy bend. It wasn't a place of manicured lawns or polished benches, but a raw, open space where families carved out their own corners of joy. Folding chairs outnumbered picnic tables, and the faint haze of charcoal smoke signaled you'd found the right spot. Every other Saturday, the Dandridge family claimed their place beneath a sprawling sycamore, its branches sagging like an old friend offering shade. This was their ritual, their refuge, a day to let the world's weight slip away. Nolan Dandridge stood at the grill, a plain white tee clinging to his broad shoulders, basketball shorts loose around his knees. He wielded a pair of metal tongs with the precision of a surgeon, tending to a rack of ribs glistening with marinade. He wasn't a man who needed flash. His quiet focus spoke louder than any boast. The grill hissed as he flipped the meat, the scent of smoked paprika and brown sugar curling into the air. "Don't let those dry out," Tiana called from a folding table nearby, unwrapping a tray of sweet corn. Her gold hoop earrings caught the sunlight, glinting as she moved. "You always try to do too much at once." Nolan smirked, eyes fixed on the grill. "Woman, when have I ever messed up ribs?" Their daughter, Kendra, 15 and sharp-tongued, rolled her eyes from her lawn chair, tugging her curls into a ponytail. "Every time you talk like that, Dad." She glanced at her younger brother, Jalen, 7, who was lobbing a frisbee toward a distant tree, missing by a mile. He squealed anyway, chasing it with arms flailing like a goalie. Tiana pointed a serving spoon at both kids. "Y'all better eat today. I didn't peel all these potatoes for you to live on juice pouches." Kendra slipped her earbuds in, slumping deeper into her chair. "You're the one who cooks enough for 20 people." Tiana brushed off the jab with a smile. "I cook for my family like I love them. You'll eat like I don't." Nolan chuckled, the sound low and warm as he adjusted the coals. The afternoon moved like molasses, low, deliberate, unhurried. South Carolina's summer heat pressed down, a familiar hand on the back of the neck. Kids' laughter carried across the grass, mingling with the distant thump of a football tossed between cousins and the clink of dominoes under a nearby pavilion. Other families dotted the park, a couple grilling hot dogs by the swings, older folks trading stories over cards. Nobody was loud, nobody was causing trouble, just life unfolding in the open air. "Jalen," Nolan's voice cut through the breeze, "stay where I can see you. I'm just getting my frisbee." The boy shouted back, voice cracking with glee as he sprinted toward the tree line. "He's fine," Kendra muttered, barely looking up from her phone. "He's 7, Nolan said. That's close enough to 5. Tiana pulled a mason jar of lemonade from the cooler, pouring a cup for Nolan. "Don't let that fire die. You know how long those ribs take." He took the drink, clinking it against hers. "This ain't my first time. That's why I married you," she teased, popping a deviled egg into her mouth. Nolan shook his head, still smiling. "Woman, been roasting me since 03. That was the Dandridge family, not perfect, but real. They laughed hard, argued loud, and loved louder." Nolan, a Supervisory Special Agent with the FBI Charleston field office, had spent the last year buried in work. Long days chasing leads, longer nights writing reports on civil rights violations. These weekends were sacred, a chance to be just a dad, just a husband, not a badge. He glanced at Jalen, now breathless and waving the fris. "Be like a trophy. Look, I caught it." "You didn't catch it, you picked it up," Kendra mumbled. "I still got it." Jalen collapsed into the grass, grinning. Nolan leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "You hear that, T? Our boy's a champion. "He better be," Chana said. "He eats like one." Their laughter rang out, a sound born of peace, of knowing you're exactly where you belong. But the rhythm of the afternoon broke with a low rumble from the parking lot. Tires crunched over gravel, then rolled onto the grass, closer than any car should be. Nolan's head turned. Who's driving on the field? Chana followed his gaze. A Charleston County Sheriff's Department cruiser stopped 15 yards from their grill. Two deputies stepped out. The older one, tall and pale, late 40s, adjusted his belt, his mirrored sunglasses scanning the scene. The younger one, broader with a shaved head, kept a hand on his radio, his face unreadable. Neither smiled. "Afternoon," the older deputy said, his voice flat as he eyed the table, the food, then Nolan. "You folks got a permit for this gathering?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Nolan straightened, wiping his hands on a towel as he stepped from behind the grill. "We're not hosting an event, sir. Just a family cookout." "That right," the younger deputy said, glancing at the trays and chairs. "Looks like more than a family thing." Chana stood, her hand instinctively on Kendra's shoulder. "It's just us and the kids. No music, no loudspeakers, no crowd. We're here every other weekend." "Ma'am, I didn't ask you," the older deputy said, his tone sharp. Kendra pulled her earbuds out, eyes wide. Jalen froze mid-bite, his hot dog dangling. Nolan's face didn't change. He'd been in enough interrogations to read the energy behind every word. "Well," he said, voice steady, "this isn't a public event, just a meal. Got ID on you?" the younger deputy asked. Nolan blinked. "For what?" "We need to confirm who we're talking to. For a barbecue." Nolan's tone stayed even, but his words carried weight. "You're aware you're not required to provide identification unless you're being lawfully detained or suspected of a crime, right?" The older deputy squinted behind his sunglasses. "You getting smart with us?" "I'm answering your question." Chana's fingers tightened on Kendra's shoulder. The air thickened, the park's easy rhythm now a distant memory. The younger deputy stepped past Nolan, peering into the foil pans on the table. "What's in here? Food?" Chana snapped, stepping forward. "That's my potato salad. Please don't touch it." "I'm not touching anything, ma'am, just checking." He pressed a button on his radio. "Unit 7, go ahead and run a vehicle check. Black SUV, South Carolina plate, 6, Angle 2-9. Nolan's SUV." Chana exchanged a glance with Nolan, quick, loaded with unspoken words. He gave a subtle nod. Kendra whispered, "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby," Nolan said softly. "We're just fine." But his body was taut now, legs slightly apart, hands in clear view, not raised, not hidden, just visible. "I'm gonna ask again," the older deputy said, stepping closer. "Let me see some ID." Nolan inhaled through his nose. "What's your reasonable suspicion here?" "You're obstructing." "No, sir," Nolan replied. "I'm standing still. I'm speaking clearly. I haven't moved. I haven't touched anything. I've answered your questions. I'm not obstructing." The deputy's jaw flexed, his sunglasses reflecting Nolan's image, arms at his sides, brow furrowed, not angry, just ready. Kendra stood now, her fingers trembling. "Mom, can they make us leave?" Chana didn't answer. The younger deputy returned, nodding to his partner. Plates registered to a Nolan Dandridge, Mount Pleasant address. "That's me," Nolan said. "You sure about that?" the older deputy said, tapping the name into a tablet. "Got anything to prove it?" Nolan sighed, just enough to release the tension in his chest, and reached for his wallets, lowly, deliberately. He didn't pull his driver's license. Instead, he handed over a federal badge and credentials. The older deputy blinked, took it, read it, then looked at Nolan again, slower this time. Special Agent, he muttered. Supervisory Special Agent, Nolan corrected. Internal Affairs Bureau. Silence, thick, heavy silence. The younger deputy glanced at the badge, then at his partner. You serious? Nolan didn't respond. Tiana folded her arms, her expression stone, her eyes saying everything her voice didn't. The deputies exchanged a look. Didn't realize. The older one muttered, Apologies, sir. You didn't ask, Nolan said. Just doing our jobs, the younger one added. I've seen that line used before, Nolan replied, usually when someone gets hurt. The deputies lingered, offered awkward nods, then turned back to their cruiser. No more words, no citation, just the crunch of gravel under boots as they retreated. Jalen, still clutching his hot dog, finally spoke. What just happened? Nolan crouched, eyes level with his son's. Nothing you did, but you need to remember what you saw. Tiana's phone was still in her hand, the screen dim but recording, steady from the moment the deputies arrived. Audio crisp, faces clear. She tapped the screen once, saved the clip. You think they saw you? Kendra whispered, eyes on the cruiser as it rolled away. I don't care if they did, Tiana muttered. Nolan stood, arms crossed, watching the car disappear down the hill. The park looked unchanged. Kids still played. A speaker crackled with soul music. But for the Dandridges, everything had shifted. Jalen climbed into a folding chair, chewing his lip. Are we still eating? Tiana glanced at the table, ribs cooling under foil. We should, we're still here. But no one reached for a plate. Kendra folded her arms, voice sharp. So that's it. They show up, mess with us, then drive off. That's how it usually goes. Nolan said quietly, his gaze fixed where the cruiser had vanished. But Dad, they tried to embarrass you. They talked to Mom like she wasn't even. Kendra broke off, furious. I know what they tried to do, Nolan said, his voice low, measured, but carrying a new weight. But we didn't give them what they wanted. What did they want? Jalen asked. Nolan looked at his son, ketchup on his chin, innocence still clinging. Control, he said. They expected fear. Kendra shook her head. That's so messed up. Tiana grabbed a stack of paper plates, trying to force normalcy back. Let's eat. We're not letting them ruin our day. But when she handed a plate to Kendra, the girl didn't take it. I'm not hungry. Jalen picked at a piece of corn, slower now, the energy shifted. Tiana's voice softened, almost to herself. I shouldn't have to record things like this. I shouldn't have to keep my hand on a phone just in case. Nolan sat, not to eat, just to breathe. He rubbed his forehead, eyes closed for a moment. You know what's messed up, Kendra said, louder now. If you weren't FBI, if you were just some guy, they might have arrested you, or worse. Nolan opened his eyes. That's why we stay calm. Why should we? Kendra snapped. Why do we always have to be the ones keeping calm? Why can't they? Because the rules aren't written for us, Nolan said, the words heavy, final. Tiana's hand paused as she reached for a drink, her eyes softening. She knew that tone it came out only when Nolan felt trapped. You never talk like that, she said gently. He gave a dry laugh. Yeah, and I still believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. Then what changed? He looked at his family, at the table, the park. Sometimes you just get tired of watching your kids see things you hoped they'd never have to. Silence settled, not empty but full of recognition, shared weight. Tiana sat beside him. Well, they saw it, and they're not the same. No, Nolan said, looking at Kendra, her arms still crossed, anger swelling in her eyes. They're not. You did the right thing, he told her. For paying attention, for asking questions, for caring. Kendra looked toward the lake, voice small. It just feels like it never stops. It doesn't, Nolan said, but neither do we. Tiana opened her phone, replayed the clip. Deputies walking up, their questions, Nolan's badge. What are you gonna do with it? Kendra asked. I don't know yet. Maybe you should post it. Kendra said. Jalen looked up from his corn. If people see it, they'll believe you. Nolan raised an eyebrow. And if they don't, then we show them again. Jalen said, matter of fact. Tiana looked at Nolan. He gave a subtle nod. She opened the app, pressed share. The video uploaded with a simple message. This happened today in Crestwood Meadows. My family, no permit, no problem, but they came anyway. Watch for yourself. What started as a quiet upload would soon ripple far beyond the park, pulling Nolan and his family into a storm they hadn't sought, but couldn't avoid. By evening, the sky glowed soft orange, cicadas humming their nightly chant. The Dandridges drove home in silence, the radio off, Jalen asleep against the window, Kendra scrolling her phone. At home, Tiana unpacked the cooler, leftover ribs, untouched deviled eggs, feeling like they belonged to a different life. Nolan changed into jeans and a button-up, needing to feel put together. How long you think before someone says we're overreacting? He asked, staring out the kitchen window. Some already are, Tiana said, nodding at her phone. Comments had started within minutes. This is exactly what I've been talking about. Why do they always assume we're doing something wrong, but also looks staged? Maybe don't cook out in a public park without permission. This dude's not even really FBI. Kendra wandered in, phone in hand. Dad, I think it's going viral. One of my friends reposted it, and now some verified person on Instagram shared it. People are stitching it, commenting like crazy. Nolan nodded slowly, turning on the TV. Local news hadn't picked it up yet, but it was only a matter of time. You okay with it? Tiana asked. I don't know. He said, this was supposed to be for us, family time. Now it's evidence. Kendra's voice was sharp. It's always been evidence. The doorbell rang. Nolan checked the peephole. A reporter, local station, microphone in hand, cameraman behind her. He exhaled, opened the door. Mr. Dandridge, I'm Amber Price with Channel 6. We saw the video. Can we ask a few questions? He glanced back at Tiana, who gave a single nod. You have 5 minutes, he said. 5 minutes was all it took to spark something bigger. The living room glowed under the late evening light, blinds half closed, tension settling like dust. Nolan sat across from Amber, legs crossed, hands calm in his lap. The camera's red light blinked. Tiana stood out of frame, arms crossed. Kendra filmed on her phone, silent, focused. Mr. Dandridge. Amber began. Your video's been viewed over 300 zeros. 0 times since this morning. Can you explain what happened from your perspective? Nolan paused, choosing his words. We were having lunch. Me, my wife, my kids, that's it. We weren't causing a disturbance. We weren't breaking any law, but 2 deputies decided we were worth stopping. You identified yourself as an FBI agent. Do you believe that changed how they treated you? No, Nolan said. I believe it changed how they stopped treating me. Amber raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? If I didn't have a badge, they would have kept pushing, maybe searched our car, maybe told us to leave, maybe worse, but a badge made them second. Guess the story they were writing about us. And do you think this was racially motivated? Nolan glanced at Tiana, then looked into the camera. I don't think it. I know it. Silence. The camera hummed. Amber shifted. I appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to say? Nolan faced the lens. Watch the video. Watch how they speak to my wife, to me. Ask yourself, Would they have said the same things at a cookout with a different family? The crew packed up quickly, leaving without small talk. Nolan exhaled, the kind of breath you feel in your chest. Thought you weren't gonna say anything, Chana said softly. I wasn't, he replied, but it stopped being about just us. You did good, she said. He rubbed his hands together, walked to the sink, poured a glass of water. I don't like the attention. I know, but the truth don't wait for comfort. Upstairs, Kendra uploaded her edit, park footage, then the interview, captioned, "He's more than a badge. He's a dad, and they treated him like a threat." By morning, it would cross 1 million views, but in the kitchen, Nolan paced. You think it'll blow over? No, Chana said, and I don't think it should. He ran a hand across his jaw. I'm not scared of backlash. I just don't want my family in the middle. You didn't put us in the middle, she said. They did. That night, after the kids slept, Nolan and Chana sat on the back porch, crickets filling the air. I thought I could fix the system quietly, he said, from the inside. You still can, she replied, but now people know who you are. Maybe that's what the system needs. He leaned back. When I was a kid, my dad told me not to give them a reason, and now, Chana asked. I think they don't need one. She looked at him, her eyes steady. So what are you gonna do? He stared into the dark, not stay quiet. By sunrise, Nolan's face was on 3 news sites, 1 local, 2 national. By lunch 5, by evening 23, FBI agent harassed by deputies at family BBQ. Some outlets used questioned or confronted. Others didn't soften the edges. The video was dissected, shared, debated. His inbox overflowed, his voicemail maxed out. Even his neglected LinkedIn had messages, some supportive, some angry, some questioning his credentials. Then came the knock, not at the door, but in his agency email. Subject, urgent request for internal debrief from Assistant Deputy Director Vernon Slight. Nolan stared at the message. SSA Dandridge, please make yourself available for a conference call today at 1006 regarding recent media circulation. Be advised, this will be considered an internal compliance review. Chana, folding laundry, glanced up as he muttered, internals pulling me in. You think they'll suspend you? No, but they might ask me to stay quiet. You're not going to, though. No. She nodded. Good. At 4:00 p.m., Nolan sat at his desk, webcam on, posture rigid. 4 faces blinked onto the screen. DC, Regional Office, Headquarters. Slight spoke. Agent Dandridge, this call is recorded. Do you consent to proceed? Yes. You're the subject of widespread media attention due to an off-duty incident. Are you aware? I am. Do you acknowledge the video may reflect on your position with the Bureau? Anything I do could reflect on the Bureau, Nolan replied. Did you instruct your wife to publish the video? No, she made that decision. But you've commented publicly. I've been asked. I've responded. I haven't violated protocols. A woman from legal affairs cleared her throat. We're not accusing misconduct, but advising discretion. We've received inquiries from law enforcement unions claiming defamation. Nolan raised an eyebrow. Defamation? I recorded nothing false. We must consider Bureau optics, Slight said. So the optics of me standing calmly while deputies escalate a non-issue. Nolan asked. A pause. We're asking you refrain from further commentary while this is reviewed. I understand, Nolan said. But I won't apologize for being recorded in my own life. The call ended with vague assurances, no answers. Nolan stepped onto the porch, the sky soft with clouds, a breeze rustling the crepe myrtle. Tiana handed him coffee. They tried to pull rank. Not directly, but it's coming. You gonna stop talking? He looked at her. They just made me want to talk more. That night, Nolan posted a video from his backyard. No music, no effects, just him. My name is Nolan Dandridge. I've worked for the Bureau for 15 years. I believe in law, in order, but also in fairness. What happened to my family wasn't about law or order. It was about assumption, and I'm done being silent. The morning after Nolan's backyard video, the kitchen smelled of coffee and toast, a faint normalcy clinging to the air. Jalen sat at the table, sketching planes in a notebook, while Kendra scrolled her phone, earbuds dangling from one ear. Tiana was at the stove, flipping bacon, but her eyes kept darting to her own phone, notifications piling up like leaves in a storm. Nolan leaned against the counter, sipping coffee, his phone buzzing again. He glanced at the screen and froze. The name, Marlon Vickers, stirred a dig. A dulled memory from Quantico, early mornings on the shooting range, late nights dissecting case files, Marlon's sharp tongue cutting through the silence. They hadn't been close, but respect had bound them, forged in shared grit. Nolan swiped to open the message, saw the video. They're listening now. You should speak where they can hear you. Call me. He stared at the words, thumb hovering over the call button. Who's that? Tiana asked, catching his expression. Old colleague, Nolan said, voice low. Marlon Vickers works with the Justice Collective now. The ones always on the news. Kendra looked up, curious. The group that protests police unions. They don't just protest, Nolan said. They push for reform, accountability, loudly. You gonna call him? Tiana asked, setting a plate of bacon on the table. Nolan didn't answer right away. He hit call instead. Marlon picked up on the first ring. Dandridge, been a long time. It has, Nolan said, stepping toward the window. Didn't expect to hear from you. I'm not calling for old time's sake, Marlon said, his voice still carrying that familiar edge. I'm with the Justice Collective. We've been watching your video. It's cutting through the noise. You didn't yell, didn't threaten, just existed, and still got treated like a problem. That's power, man. People feel it. Nolan's grip tightened on the phone. I didn't post that video to start a speaking tour. I know, but your story's out there now. The collective's doing a panel in DC next week. Civil Rights Forum. Half the room's press, the other half lawmakers, advocates, lawyers. They want a voice like yours. Someone who's worked the system, who knows the badge, but also the weight of wearing it while black. Nolan leaned against the counter, silent. Jalen glanced up from his sketch, sensing the shift in his dad's posture. And if I say no, Nolan asked, then they'll keep guessing what you think. Marlon said, someone else will tell your story for you. The line stuck, sharp as a blade. Nolan ended the call with a promise to think it over, but Marlon's words looped in his head. He looked at his family, Jalen smearing jelly on toast, Kendra texting furiously, Tiana watching him like she already knew his answer. What do you want? She asked. For me to speak at a forum, big one, in DC. Kendra's head snapped up. You gonna do it? I don't know, Nolan said. This wasn't supposed to be about me, but it is now, Tiana said, her voice steady. You didn't ask for it, but it's here. He rubbed his jaw, the weight of the morning settling in. The video had crossed 300,000 views overnight, comments flooding in, some supportive, others vicious. Thank you for showing this. This is why we can't trust cops, but also staged. He's just playing the race card. FBI, probably a desk jockey. His voicemail was full, his inbox a mess of interview requests, threats, and strangers thanking him for speaking their truth. And now Marlon, pulling him toward a stage he hadn't sought. That night, Nolan sat at the edge of Kendra's bed, her room a mix of scented candles and posters of artists he didn't recognize. An R&B playlist hummed through a Bluetooth speaker. She was hunched over homework, pencil tapping restlessly. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," she said, not looking up. "Do you think I should do this forum?" She stopped writing, turned to face him. "What would you talk about?" "What happened, how I see the system, how it feels to wear a badge that doesn't protect you the way people think it does." Kendra set her pencil down. "You always tell me to stand up for people, even when it's uncomfortable." "I do," he said. "So what's stopping you?" Nolan swallowed, her honesty cutting deep. "You're right," he said quietly. She grinned, a rare softness breaking through. "You'll do great, just don't wear the ugly tie." "Which ones are ugly?" "All of them," she said, laughing. He chuckled, the sound easing the knot in his chest. For the first time that day, he felt lighter. By the weekend, Nolan was on a plane to DC. No fanfare, no announcements. The forum was in a plain auditorium near Capitol Hill. Rows of folding chairs filled with faces, some curious, some skeptical, all waiting for something real. When his name was called, a murmur rippled through the crowd. A few recognized him from the video, others just sensed the weight of his presence. He took the mic, cleared his throat, and spoke slowly. "I've carried a badge for over 15 years, he began. "I've sat across from corrupt officers, documented abuses, filed reports that got people fired. But last week, I got a reminder that none of that shields me when I'm just a black man in a park." He paused, letting the words settle. "My kids were watching. My wife was recording. I didn't yell, didn't resist, didn't pose a threat. And still, I had to prove I belonged there." Murmurs spread, heads nodded, pens scratched on paper. "I know what the manual says. I helped write parts of it. But the real training comes when you're on the other side, when you see suspicion through your children's eyes." He paused again, the room so quiet he could hear his own breath. "I'm not here to offer solutions. I'm here to remind you this isn't rare. It's just recorded now." The applause wasn't loud, but it was steady, real. People lined up afterward to shake his hand, some crying, others just nodding and walking away. Marlon clapped him on the back. "That's what I'm talking about. You're not just telling your story, you're making them listen." But Nolan didn't feel triumphant. He felt exposed, raw, the weight of the room, the eyes, the expectations. It was heavier than he'd anticipated. On the flight home, he stared out the window, the clouds below a blur of white and gray. His phone buzzed with a text from Chana. Kendra cried watching the clip on PBS. "Jalen asked why the room got quiet after you said that part about existing in peace." He landed late Sunday, slipping through the front door with his carry-on. The house was dark, quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the hallway clock. Chana was waiting in the living room, curled under a throw blanket, a book on her lap. She watched him drop his bag and kick off his shoes. "How was it?" she asked softly. "Exhausting," he said, easing into the armchair, "but worth it." "I saw the clip," she said, setting the book aside. Kendra cried. "Jalen wanted to know why the room got so quiet after you said the part about existing in peace." Nolan closed his eyes. "I didn't plan that line. It just came out. That's why it hit," she said. "You weren't performing, you were telling the truth." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands. I got a call before I boarded. Director Beeman. Tiana sat up straighter. What'd he say? He said I'm making waves, reminded me of my oath, my confidentiality agreement. The Bureau doesn't take stands on personal experiences. They want you to shut up, she said, her voice flat. They want me to remember who signs my paychecks. Silence fell, heavy and sharp. Do you want to stop? She asked. It's not about what I want, he said. It's what happens if I keep going. What it means for my team, my cases, my clearance. So it's your job or your voice, she said, almost to herself. He nodded. It's a choice I've made before, quietly. Let things slide, focused on the work, not the noise. But now you're the noise, she said. He looked up at her, and part of me hates that. Tiana stood, sat, on the edge of the coffee table, facing him. When you walked into that park, you weren't Special Agent Dandridge. You were Nolan, my husband, our kid's father, the man who won't let me season the ribs because I overdo the garlic. He grinned faintly. You do overdo the garlic. They didn't care who you were, she continued. You had to flash a badge to be treated like a person, and now you have a platform. You think this is about ego, that we want the spotlight? No, she said. But it asked for us. Nolan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I've always believed in systems. I still do. But maybe systems don't change unless the people inside them shake them a little. That sounds like a man leaning toward doing something big, she said, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled. Or something reckless. There's a difference, she said, resting her hand on his knee. The next morning, Nolan called in, requesting a week of personal leave. His first, without a family emergency. By afternoon, a message arrived from a local university. Professor Lindsay Abernathy, who taught criminal justice, asked if he'd guessed. Speak in a lecture on systemic bias and accountability. He didn't say yes immediately, but he didn't say no. He sat on the porch, Jalen curled up beside him with a book about planes, Kendra inside blasting music through headphones. The neighborhood moved on, mail truck rolling by, a neighbor walking their dog. For once, Nolan wasn't rushing. I keep thinking, he said aloud, what if that badge hadn't been in my wallet? Jalen looked up. What do you mean? What if they didn't believe me? What if things had gone different? The boy frowned, processing. Would they have taken you away? Nolan didn't answer. He pulled his son close, arm around his shoulders. Deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. It was just beginning. 3 days later, Nolan stood at the front of a crowded lecture hall at Charleston Southern University. The room smelled of coffee and dry erase markers, students shuffling notebooks, some criminal justice majors, others political science, most having seen the video. Professor Abernathy introduced him briskly. We're fortunate to have Supervisory Special Agent Nolan Dandridge. You may know him from recent headlines, but today he's here to share what it means to work in the system, and what it feels like to be failed by it. Nolan took the mic, surveying the young faces, some skeptical, some eager. I'm not here to give a lecture on theory, he began. I'm here to talk about what it feels like when doing everything right still lands you under suspicion. He paced slowly, no notes, just memory. Last Saturday, I was at the park with my family. Nothing loud, no crowd, just ribs on the grill, my kids tossing a frisbee. Then 2 officers showed up. They didn't ask what was going on. They asked for ID, asked what we were doing there. One walked around our table like he was casing it for drugs. The other ran my plates, all without cause. Nods in the audience. When I asked why, they told me to stop being smart. When I pointed out they had no reason to detain us, they escalated. I had to pull out my badge, not because I was proud of it in that moment, but because it was the only thing that'd make them back off. A few students looked down, uncomfortable. "I've spent 15 years trying to be part of the solution," he continued, "but that day reminded me I'm never just a federal agent. I'm a black man. That's always the first thing they see." A hand raised near the back, a student in a gray hoodie. "Do you think the system can change?" Nolan looked at him. "Yes, but not by accident, not by silence. Change happens when we stop waiting for the system to fix itself and start holding it accountable, from the inside and out." Another student, a young woman, raised her hand. "What can people like us do? Ask hard questions," Nolan said. "Challenge procedures that don't serve everyone. Speak up when things don't sit right, even if it costs you a grade, a friend, a job offer." He softened his tone. "And when you see someone treated unfairly, don't turn away. You don't need a badge to stand up for someone. You just need a spine." The room went quiet. When the talk ended, students lined up to speak with him. Some asked for advice, others said thank you. One young woman teared up, saying her father had gone through something similar but never spoke about it. "He just came home quiet," she said. "I get it now." That night, Nolan sat at the kitchen table, replaying the lecture in his head. Tiana rinsed dishes at the sink. "I said things today I've never said out loud," he told her. "Sometimes it takes other people listening for us to hear ourselves," she said. He nodded. "I'm gonna keep going, speaking, writing, meeting people in the department. I want to start something that lasts." Tiana dried her hands, turned to face him. "Then do it, but don't do it alone." He looked toward the hallway, where Jalen's laughter echoed from the TV. Kendra's bedroom door cracked, light spilling out. "No," he said, "I won't." The next morning, Nolan reached out to Marlon Vickers again. They spoke for an hour, sketching out a plan for a small, non-profit line of sight. Its mission: training officers, educating the public, amplifying unheard voices from back rooms and patrol cars. Nolan didn't care if it grew big, he just wanted it real. But before he could fully set it in motion, a final visit to Crestwood Meadows would bring everything full circle. Nolan drove back to the park alone, a folding chair in the back seat, a notebook under his arm. The sky was clear, a breeze tugging at the sycamore's branches. Kids played on the far side, their laughter carrying over freshly mowed grass. He set up the chair in the same spot, opened the notebook, and stared at the blank page. He didn't write at first, just listened. Sneakers on pavement, a dog barking, a grandmother shouting for someone to grab their juice box. Ordinary, peaceful. Then he began to write, not a speech or a report, but thoughts, questions. What did they see when they walked up to us? What would have happened if I wasn't carrying ID? Why do my kids pause when they see a patrol car? What's the cost of staying silent? A man approached mid-30s, pushing a stroller, a little girl beside him clutching a half-eaten popsicle. He slowed, nodded. "You the guy from the video?" Nolan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Just wanted to say I saw what happened. Sorry you had to go through that. Shouldn't be that way." "Appreciate that," Nolan said. The man nodded once, kept walking. No camera, no handshake, just truth shared in passing. Nolan closed the notebook, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But before he could settle back into the moment, a familiar voice called out, "You thought you'd come without us?" He turned, smiling as Tiana approached, sundress swaying, sandals kicking up dust. Kendra followed in denim overalls, phone in hand, and Jalen carried a kite under his arm. "You said you were just clearing your head," Tiana said, smirking. "I was," Nolan said, rising. "Didn't expect company. We thought it was time we took our spot back." Tiana replied, gesturing to the sycamore. Kendra spread a blanket on the grass. Jalen assembling the kite nearby. Tiana handed Nolan a foil, wrapped sandwich, brisket, don't get spoiled. They sat and ate under the same tree where the world had shifted weeks before. No cruisers, no questions, just family. Jalen stood ready. Dad, help me get this thing in the air. Nolan brushed crumbs off his lap. Let's give it a shot. They ran across the grass, laughing as the kite caught a gust, soaring high, tail whipping in the wind. Kendra snapped photos, Tiana watching, her face calm. After a while, Nolan returned to his chair, catching his breath. Tiana sat beside him. Do you regret it? Posting the video, speaking out. He shook his head. Not anymore. She leaned into him. We're proud of you. He looked at the park, sunlight glinting off the lake, Jalen dancing beneath the kite, Kendra smiling for real. I used to think staying quiet kept us safe, he said, but it just made it easier for others to stay comfortable. He opened his notebook, flipped to a fresh page and wrote again, not because he had to, but because someone else might need to read it one day. The words came easily now, each one a step toward something bigger, something that wouldn't fade with the afternoon light. The kite danced above Crestwood Meadows, a bright slash of red against the endless blue, its tail snapping in the breeze. Nolan sat back in his folding chair, notebook open on his lap, the pen still warm from his last words. Tiana leaned against him, her shoulder brushing his, a quiet anchor in the afternoon's glow. Kendra sprawled on the blanket, snapping photos of Jalen as he tugged the kite string, his laughter sharp and free. The park hummed with life, kids chasing each other across the grass, a distant grill sending up curls of smoke, the Ashley River glinting like polished glass. For the first time in weeks, the Dandridges felt like they were reclaiming something, not just defending it. Nolan's pen moved again, slower now, the questions from earlier giving way to something new. What does it mean to belong, to stand in a place and know it's yours, no matter who questions it? How do you teach your kids to carry that weight without breaking? He glanced at Jalen, who was now spinning in circles, the kite dipping wildly above him. Kendra caught it on her phone, giggling. He's gonna crash that thing, she said. Let him, Tiana replied, her voice soft but firm. He's figuring it out. Nolan closed the notebook, his fingers lingering on the cover. The words he'd written weren't answers. They were markers, a map of where he'd been and where he was going. The park felt different today, not because the grass was greener or the air clearer, but because they were here on their terms. No foil pans, no folding table, just a blanket, a kite, and a sandwich. Just them. You're quiet, Tiana said, nudging him. What's going on in that head? He exhaled, a small smile tugging at his lips. Trying to figure out what's next. The video, the forum, the lecture, it's all moving faster than I expected. It's not just moving, she said, it's growing. People are listening. Some are, he said, his eyes drifting to the horizon. Others are waiting for me to slip up, to say too much or not enough. Let them wait, she said, her tone sharp. You're not here to make them comfortable. He nodded, her words settling like a stone in his chest. Comfort had never been the goal, but he'd spent years chasing stability, keeping his head down, doing the work, believing the system would bend if he pushed hard enough from the inside. Now, with his face on news sites and his voice echoing across platforms he barely understood, stability felt like a distant memory, but it wasn't chaos either. It was something else, something alive. Kendra sat up, brushing grass off her overalls. Dad, someone just DM'd me. They saw your talk on YouTube, said it's trending on X now. Nolan raised an eyebrow. Trending? Yeah, she said, scrolling her phone. Hashtags and everything. #Crestwood BBQ, #badge and bias. People are sharing clips, making threads. Some professor even used it in a class. Tiana smirked. You're a case study now. Great, Nolan said dryly, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. He looked at Kendra. What are they saying? Mostly good stuff, she said. People saying you're brave, that you're calling out what they've been through. But there's trolls too, saying you're exaggerating, that you should have just shown your ID and moved on. Let me see, he said. She handed him the phone. He scrolled through the comments, hundreds of them, a mix of fire and venom. This is why we need reform. Thank you for speaking up, but also, he's just stirring trouble. FBI agents don't get to play victim. He handed the phone back, his jaw tight. You okay? Tiana asked. They don't know me, he said. They see a clip, a badge, a headline. They don't see us. Then show them, Kendra said, her voice sharp with the certainty only a teenager could muster. You're already out there. Don't stop now. He looked at her, then at Jalen, who was now tangled in the kite string, laughing as he tried to free himself. She's right, Tiana said. You've got their attention. Use it. Nolan didn't respond right away. He stood, brushing off his jeans, and walked over to help Jalen untangle the kite. Hold still, champ, he said, kneeling to free the string. Jalen grinned, his face flushed from running. You think I can get it higher, higher than the trees? Nolan said, ruffling his hair. Just keep running. As Jalen sprinted off again, Nolan returned to the blanket, his mind turning. Marlin's call, the forum, the lecture. They were pieces of something bigger, something he hadn't fully grasped until now. Line of Sight, the non-profit he'd started with Marlin, wasn't just a project. It was a commitment. To speak, to train, to listen, to amplify, but it was also a risk. The Bureau's call still hung over him, a reminder of the line he was walking. His clearance, his team, his career, all of it could be on the table if he pushed too hard. Back at the blanket, Tiana handed him a bottle of water. You're thinking about the Bureau, aren't you? He nodded, taking a sip. They didn't say it outright, but they're watching. If I keep talking, it's not just my story anymore. It's theirs too. You're not breaking any rules, she said. You're telling the truth. Truth doesn't always protect you, he said, his voice low. Not when it's inconvenient. She tilted her head, studying him. You've spent 15 years protecting other people's truths, writing reports, building cases, cleaning up messes nobody else wanted to touch. When do you get to protect yours? He didn't answer, but her words landed deep. He'd spent his career in the shadows of the system, filing complaints, documenting violations, believing the work would speak for itself. But the park had changed that. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Kendra's trembling hands, Jalen's wide eyes, Tiana's steady grip on her phone. It was about every family who'd ever been asked for a permit they didn't need, every person who'd had to prove they belonged. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass, a woman approached, mid-40s, wearing a sundress and carrying a picnic basket. She slowed, her eyes flicking between Nolan and the tree. You're the family from the video, aren't you? She asked, her voice tentative but warm. Nolan nodded, bracing himself. Yeah, that's us. She smiled, a little sad. I was here that day, at the pavilion with my cousins. I saw the cruiser pull up. Didn't know what was happening, but I could feel it wasn't right. I'm glad you spoke up. Thank you, Nolan said, his voice steady but softer now. My brother went through something like that last year, she said. Cops stopped him walking home from work. No reason, just questions. He didn't have a badge to show. It didn't end as clean as yours did. Nolan's chest tightened. I'm sorry, She shook her head. "Not your fault, but seeing you out there, it means something. Makes me think maybe he'll tell his story one day too." As she walked away, Tiana squeezed Nolan's hand. "That's why you keep going," she said. "Not for you, for her brother, for us." He looked at her, then at the park, the kite still soaring, Jalen's laughter cutting through the air. "I know," he said. "But it's not just about speaking now. It's about building something." "Line of sight?" she asked. He nodded. "It's not enough to tell the story. We need to change the rules, train officers to question their assumptions, teach communities how to hold them accountable. Make sure the next family doesn't need a badge to eat in peace." Kendra looked up from her phone. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" "Yeah," he said, the words solid, final. "I am." The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. Jalen's kite eventually tangled in a tree, and Nolan climbed up to free it, earning cheers from his son. Kendra posted a photo of the moment, Nolan balancing on a branch, kite in hand, Jalen beaming below, with a caption, "Taking back our space." Tiana packed up the blanket, her movements deliberate, like she was sealing something sacred. They drove home as the sky turned to fire, the cicadas picking up their nightly hum. At home, Nolan sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open. The inbox was aflood, messages from colleagues, advocates, strangers. One stood out, an invitation from a national civil rights organization to join a task force on policing reform. Another from a community group in Charleston, asking him to lead a workshop on de-escalation. He didn't respond yet, but he saved them, each one a thread in the tapestry he was weaving. Tiana joined him, setting a mug of tea on the table. "You're not gonna sleep tonight, are you?" "Probably not," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "Too much to do." She sat across from him, her eyes steady. "You remember that time in college when the campus police tried to shut down our party?" He chuckled. "You told them to come back with a warrant. I was shaking behind you. You were not," she said, laughing. "But you're not shaking now." "No," he said, "I'm not." She reached across the table, her hand covering his. "You're not alone in this. You've got us. You've got Marlin, the collective, those students, that woman from the park. You're not carrying this by yourself." He squeezed her hand, the weight of her words grounding him. "I know." Upstairs, Kendra was editing another video, a montage of the park, the forum, the lecture, set to a soft beat. She added a caption, "This is what it looks like to stand up." Jalen was already asleep, his kite propped against his bedroom wall, a reminder of the day they took back their place. Nolan and Tiana stayed at the table, talking late into the night, not about the video or the bureau, but about the future. Workshops, trainings, a website for line of sight. They sketched ideas on a napkin, the kind of plans that felt too big for one day but too urgent to wait. By morning, the video from the park had crossed 2 million views. News outlets called for follow-ups, but Nolan declined, choosing instead to meet with Marlin and a small team to formalize Line of Sight's mission. They secured a grant from a local foundation, enough to fund a pilot program training officers on implicit bias and community engagement. Nolan wrote the curriculum himself, drawing on his years in internal affairs, his notes from the park, and the questions still burning in his mind. The bureau called again, this time with a softer tone. Director Beeman acknowledged the impact of Nolan's public presence, but reiterated the need for discretion. Nolan listened, agreed to follow protocol, but made no promises about silence. He wasn't defying them. He was redefining what loyalty to the system meant. Not blind allegiance, but a demand for it to live up to its own ideals. Days later, Nolan stood in front of a community center in Charleston. A small crowd gathered for Line of Sight's first workshop. The room was mixed: officers in plainclothes, community members, a few reporters. He didn't use a script, just spoke from the heart. "I've worn a badge for 15 years, he began. "I've seen the system from every angle. It's not broken, but it's bent, and it doesn't straighten out unless we all pull." He shared the park story, not as a victim, but as a witness. He talked about Kendra's trembling hands, Jalen's questions, Channa's steady resolve. He challenged the officers to question their instincts, the community to demand accountability, and everyone to listen to the stories that don't make headlines. When a young officer asked how to balance authority with fairness, Nolan didn't hesitate. "Start by seeing the person in front of you, not the story you've already written about them." The workshop ended with applause, but Nolan didn't linger for praise. He drove back to Crestwood Meadows one last time that day alone, the notebook in his passenger seat. The park was quiet now, the sun low, casting long shadows across the grass. He didn't set up a chair or open the notebook. He just stood under the sycamore, letting the sounds wash over him. Kids shouting, a basketball bouncing, the river's gentle lap. This was the place where it started, where the world had shifted, where his family had been asked to prove they belonged. He didn't need to prove it anymore. They belonged, not because of a badge, not because of a video, but because they were here, living, breathing, claiming their space. The notebook was full now, pages of questions, reflections, and plans. But the last line, written that afternoon with Channa's hand on his, was simple: "We belong here. We always did." Nolan walked back to his car, the weight of the day settling into something new, not burden, but purpose. Line of Sight would grow, slowly, steadily, training by training, story by story. The Bureau would watch, the trolls would comment, the headlines would fade, but the work wouldn't. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about the woman in the park, her brother, the students in the lecture hall, the officers who'd listened today. It was about Kendra and Jalen, who'd grow up knowing their father didn't stay silent. As he drove home, the sky turned to dusk, the first stars blinking into view. His phone buzzed. A text from Kendra: "Just posted the workshop clip. People are sharing it. You're doing it, Dad." He smiled, set the phone down, and kept driving. The road ahead was long, uncertain, but for the first time in weeks he felt steady. Not because the fight was over, but because he wasn't fighting alone. The Dandridges would return to Crestwood Meadows, maybe next weekend, maybe the one after. They'd bring the grill, the frisbee, the laughter. And if a cruiser rolled up again, they'd be ready, not with fear, but with truth, recorded and shared, a reminder that their story wasn't just theirs. It was everyone's, and it wasn't going anywhere.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.